Los Angeles. At Los Angeles, the well-known hospitality of Dr. Amarjit Singh Marwah and his wife Kuljit Kaur from the Sodhi family of Patiala was extended to me with its usual warmth and courtesy. Dr. Marwah found very little time for serious discussion because his profession and his hobbies. His horses, his wines, his dogs, his farm, his surgery. Yet he would personally rush to receive and send off guests that flow in and out of a continuous line. Although he does not practice yoga, he is very alert physically and mentally, and compared to him, Yogi Bhajan, who teaches yoga, is the bulkiest and laziest person I have seen among the USA Sikhs. He reminds me of a medieval abbots and mahants. He has neither the body nor the mind and soul of a real yogi. In Los Angeles, about half a dozen 3HO leaders who left Yogi Bhajan met me and told me their positive and negative experiences. Later on, Mrs. Theda Parmer took me to a film on Yogi Bhajan's first visit to India with 84 American Sikhs. I have described the film in the book. The theater was full of ex-disciples of Yogi Bhajan and only about 4 present-day disciples, one of whom was an Indian Sikh. Many of those who were disgusted by the inside administration of 3HO by Yogi Bhajan met me during the interval and when the film was over. They were neither yogis nor Sikhs. It appeared that they went through an experiment and gave it up for good. The prominent leaders with whom I held lengthy discussions were Yogi Bhajan's first chancellor, Philip Hoskins, Akal Singh, his young and sensitive wife, Colleen, filmmaker Don Conroe, Jeffrey Wolf, Jeffrey Rubenstein, and his father, Albert I. Rubenstein, and a host of others. Each had a very, very sad tale to tell. It was difficult for me to disbelieve them, and it was still more difficult for me to check the authenticity of what they said. Their bitterness is taking the shape of hatred. The question they could not answer satisfactorily was, why did they put up with all of this for so many years? Even if 1/100th of what these gentlemen said was true, then Yogi Bhajan has been consciously or unconsciously sowing the seeds of self-destruction within his own system. The sooner he weeds these poison plants from within 3HO, the better for him. If they're part of the stories to be told, it can be told and substantiated by them only. I would personally forgive Yogi Bhajan if he mended his ways and methods, and I would never carry the bitter reaction to those ultimate limits to which these old comrades of Yogi Bhajan might carry. I also met Dr. Balkar Singh, Dr. Hakam Singh, Dr. A.S. Grewal, and later Sardar Shankar Singh and Sardar Hardev Singh Gill. I delivered a lecture at the East-West Center founded by Dr. Judith Tyberg, a PhD in Sanskrit from Benaras Hindu University. Dr. Tyberg, one of the most respected figures in Los Angeles religious and cultural centers, described to me after my lecture her own bitter experiences of Yogi Bhajan's 3 months associated with her center. Tears rolled down her angelic face, and her body trembled as she described vividly what some of the unashamed activities of Yogi Bhajan were, for which she has ample evidence. Like true saints, she is trying to forgive and forget. I felt very happy to meet and lecture at the Ramakrishna Mission Vedanta Center, now headed by my friend Swami Swahananda, whom I have known for years, when he was the editor of Vedanta Kesari and later head of the Delhi Center. Even the Americans who attended my lecture in the Vedanta Center asked me, quote, "What is your opinion about Yogi Bhajan? Is he really a Sikh? The doubts about Yogi Bhajan being a true Sikh lingers in every person who knows him. In Oakland, I stayed for 2 days with Sardar Ajib Singh Sidhu, a teacher who had fixed my lecture in the Sikh Temple Bay area. Ajib Singh is an old Sikh student federation leader. Now his sons are students, but not Sikhs in mind, body, and spirit. It is a pitiable sight to see teenagers in Sikh families growing as unspiritual and cultureless Americans, and not as disciplined Punjabis and Sikh children. This is happening where parents have taken a negative attitude toward Sikhism and are themselves reluctant to practice it seriously. But I have seen hundreds of parents who live a truly religious life, and their children are proud of their heritage and assert it in schools and playgrounds. At Berkeley, I stayed for over a month with Sardar Sukhmander Singh, an internationally known soil engineer, a devout Sikh, and a brilliant scientist, a fiery and orthodox reformer, and remarkable organizer. His contribution to the imaginative construction of Sikh temples in Houston and Berkeley is outstanding. He is now the backbone of the new organization, West Coast Institute of Sikh Studies. During my long stay with him, I was able to unearth about 500 documents about Gurdwara movement in India and Indian settlers in the USA, and I hope to collect most of them within the next few years. All this was possible only because of the generous hospitality of Sukhmander Singh and his tender-hearted wife, Charanjit Kaur, the youngest daughter of the internationally known orthopedic surgeon Dr. Karam Singh Grewal of Amritsar. While working sometimes 18 hours a day on research and writing, the gentle-hearted Charanjit, who has imbibed many noble qualities from her father and mother, was always there to look into my petty needs, the worst of which was tea or milk in the middle of the night, and a fortunate coincidence was that Sukhmander Singh also worked very hard on some science papers of his own, much harder than I did. For over a month we continued to work like two monks meditating in their separate cells, and the noble Charanjit looking to our requirements. The dynamism of Sukhmander and his deep and sincere concern about the fate of the Sikh community as a whole in its historical and contemporary perspective impressed me greatly. It was interesting to see Sukhmander Singh shouting loudly, quote, "I will pack up from this country and go and work in my farm in Ferozepur district and live in peace," end quote, so determinedly that it appeared that he was really packing up, while actually he was hurrying fast to his Richmond Hill laboratory with a mind excited and put under tension by his new creative experiments. He takes Brahminical pride in being a peasant, or Jat, of Ferozepur district, and only people living in the Punjab know what that means. Ferozepur is the Texas of Punjab, and peasants there handle guns better than the plow or the tractor. In Berkeley University, I was pleased to meet the eminent Sikh artist Mahinder Singh Gill, who is associate professor of art in an American university. I enjoyed a night-long talk with him, his sister-in-law, and Dr. Jasvinder Kaur at San Francisco. At Berkeley, I received considerable help and support from Sardar Santokh Singh, Sardar Kiwal Singh, and also met Sardar Harbhajan Singh Nihang, J.P. Singh, Dr. Janmayajna Singh, and others when I had opportunity to address the Sikh Center Sangat twice. I went to Yuba City one day again to meet the saintly Bhai Darshan Singh. At Berkeley, a surprise invitation came from Guru Tirath Singh, head of Berkeley 3HO and chancellor of the whole organization. I had earlier been invited to 3HO headquarters at Los Angeles, when a devout young lady, well-disciplined in Sikh thoughts and manners, came to pick me up from Dr. Marwar's house. I have described that visit in considerable detail in the book. Guru Tirath Singh invited me to a Chinese restaurant where Yogi Bhajan is alleged to be generally feted. Sardar Sukhmander Singh accompanied me. There we found Sat Sangat Singh, who claims to be the chairman of the Khalsa Council of Yogi Bhajan, and Guru Tirath Singh, a lawyer and chancellor who has replaced Akal Singh, Philip Hoskins. Sat Santak Singh is not very popular in the Bay Area, but Guru Tirath Singh is highly respected for his integrity and many Sikh-like virtues. Guru Tirath Singh, who is sober, gentle, and reasonable, did most of the talking, while Sat Santak Singh, with his left arm in a sling, remained silent throughout the dinner, but kept on eyeing me like an intelligence expert from some communist country. Guru Tirath Singh asked me if some people who left 3HO had met me, and he complained that some parents were taking away their children by kidnapping them. He cited the case of some peasants who took their son to Israel. I understood what he meant. I told Guru Tirath Singh that I have no conveyance of my own and I cannot go to see anyone. If anyone comes to see me, I listen to him. I do not necessarily subscribe to the views of those, for one reason or another, hate Yogi Bhajan. Yogi Bhajan has been courteous and friendly to me, and I have no other reason to be critical of him except doctrinal, where a large area of differences between us is there. I then gave him a sample of my doctrinal differences with 3HO teachings. I took out of my pocket Prem Kakar's article, which forms the subject of criticism in chapter 2 and 3 of this book. I read some passages which I have criticized in the book and told him, quote, "This is undiluted nonsense and rubbish so far as Sikh doctrines are concerned." End quote. I think Guru Tirath did not have very high opinions of Prem Kakar, and perhaps no one considers her a literary genius, except Yogi Bhajan. I sometimes wonder whether these fantastic theories he has imposed on Sikhism come from Yogi Bhajan's brain to Premka's pen, or they go from Premka's brain to Yogi Bhajan's mouth and speech. Premka, of course, generally takes no responsibility because she starts every idea with the words, quote, "Yogi Bhajan says," end quote. Then Guru Tirath Singh bluntly asked me, quote, "What is your opinion about Mahinder Singh, secretary of the SGPC?" I said, quote, "He is a first-rate mischievous man, and the common man in the streets of Amritsar knows it." Guru Tirath Singh smiled meaningfully and understandingly, as if he already knew it from his office records. I told Guru Tirath Singh that my doctrinal differences with 3HO teachings are very pronounced, and I shall be expressing my views in the form of a book on the subject sooner or later. The book was in the press at that time. We parted as understanding friends, and I hope the understanding and dialogue continues. The whole discussion took place in the presence of Sardar Sukhmander Singh. I feel sure that men like him, Ram Das Singh, Vikram Singh, and Larry Singh, and a few very enlightened women in 3HO and the younger cadre can do some serious thinking and save the 3HO organization from tearing apart between two opposing systems and gear it to the service of Sikhism. That didn't happen. Sorry. If that is done sincerely, authentically, I shall be able to throw my whole weight to serve them as a humble writer and thinker on their side. But if they try to rationalize their sins of omission and commission, then they will create confusion and chaos for themselves. I hope God graciously guides them and saves the best that has been done and eliminates the dangerous things which have hurt so many people to the point of war of vengeance.